I'm Amanda, and this is Not Your Granny's Quilt Show. Today, we've got the BadAss Quilter. A safe, supportive, and welcoming community for politically liberal quilters has been Maddie Kertay's goal for 10 years and counting. Maddie Kertay is an award-winning quilter and the founder and CEO of the BadAss Quilters Society, and believes that dedicated community is far more important than a perfect quarter-inch seam or specific quilting style. BadAss Quilters Society specifically serves and supports politically liberal quilters with community, content, and commentary on the state of today's quilting culture. Maddie is a longtime community builder, having built her state's first wholly inclusive and LGBTQIA-affirming homeschooling group to support her family and other progressive families like it when there was not a place for her family to gather with others of a like mind at the time. Maddie is the mother to 6 children ranging in ages from 33 to 22 and grandmother to 1, and she makes her home in Chattanooga, Tennessee in an old house she's restoring with her husband and way too many animals, including a rotating cast of neonatal kittens for which she is a professional foster and advocate for the most medically fragile of them year-round. Maddie is a fierce advocate for the LGBTQIA+ community of which she is a part. When not caring for kittens, slinging a hammer, or out in her garden, you can find her writing on her blog to further the evolution of the larger quilting community to become a more welcoming and diverse place. Somewhere in there, she sneaks in time for her passion of art quilting and on occasion sewing some clothing. Let's jump in with Maddie. Thank you so much for joining me today, Maddie. I have been obsessing over your stuff. I mean, it's the moment I saw, I think it was one of your stickers probably, but I was like, oh, my spirit child, like this is fantastic. Because I think I told you my friends have given me the moniker like the cussy crafter quilter, because it doesn't matter what we're doing, if we're painting, if we're puzzling, if we're sewing, I am cussing. So
Yep. I get it. Both my husband and I work from home. And what we say about working from home is it's one or the other of us cursing from one side of the house to the other, whether it's like
yeah.
turning over a dog or because all dogs, they want to be the minute I'm in here. Like, so I said, if I'm ever found dead with a head injury in here, it's going to be one of the dog's faults because I'll be like, I'll turn around and I'll like step on one or I'm like, this is how I'm going to meet my maker. It is just gonna be a head injury, and there's gonna be like one of the dogs. Nobody's gonna talk about it, and none of the dogs are gonna tell who did it, but that's how
Yeah.
it's gonna happen. It
Yeah.
is.
That's how I feel about my cat. She will just like bolt out from a corner around a corner, and I'm like, okay, I've almost died about 4 times today. Because
Yeah,
whether it's she'll zoom past me and like run down the stairs ahead of me,
yeah,
I've almost died probably 25,000 times. So
yeah. There's actually a cat sitting right there. There's one right behind the
mhm.
cat. Eventually, you'll probably see a tail bob past on the screen, and she's more likely to come and like she gets angry at me if I don't put enough attention to her. So I
Mm.
have lots of staff.
So helpful, I'm sure.
So helpful.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Well, tell me all the things. There's so many things I want to cover, but let's start with sewing and quilting. Like, how were you sewing things first? Were you quilting first? Like,
So
how?
definitely sewing first. I've been sewing since I was about 9, and I sewed kind of intermittently through my teenage years, and made extra money by I babysat a lot, but I would like repair stuff for people.
Mm.
So I made some really nice bank, being able to repair stuff and like hem jeans for people and stuff like that because I had my mother's sewing machine because my mother sewed at some point when I was very, very tiny and then stopped. And
Oh.
I've talked pretty openly about the fact that my mother was incredibly depressed and
Mm.
she had a very hard road through motherhood. And so lots of things. And one of the things that she never did again was sewing. And one day I saw the sewing machine. It was in one of those like lovely old cabinets. And it was a
Mm.
really nice sewing machine. It was a Bernina. And that was my first moment of becoming a Bernina girl.
Yeah.
Was the opening up because I actually crawled under it and because I was sitting on the floor and I looked up under it, I was like, I'd never seen the sewing machine before. Um,
Oh.
and I asked her if I could open it up and look at it. And she said, sure, but I'm not going to teach you.
Mm.
And because she was just not in a good place herself.
Sure.
And so I got out the book and I taught myself how to sew. And then I had a neighbor who helped me learn some more. And then I sewed. And then I had my children. I have 6 kids.
Well,
They are 33 to 22 years old. And so, and then we have a son in there we lost when he was a baby.
oh.
And but so I sewed for all of them obsessively. And that was in my first marriage. It was my first 3 kids.
Mhm.
And we were like poor as church mice. And
Mm.
actually church mice probably were fancier than we were. Because
Oh, no.
there's literally the time that there was nothing. I really wanted the kids to have Christmas pajamas, and there was no
Mhm.
money. So like in like Gone with the Wind fashion, I took a flannel bed sheet and I made all of them, it was king size flannel bed sheet. And I made all of them pajamas for
Perfect.
Christmas. And so there's a picture of them all, the my oldest daughter in like the little ruffly gown, and the boys in their
Mhm.
little, pajamas and stuff like that. And so I was really I was home deck, clothing, all that kind of stuff. In fact, I never really thought of myself as a quilter because there's always kind of this, thing that's an old lady thing, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
And about 12 years ago, I got interested in making a quilt. I mean, I'd made like, your rando baby blanket or something like that, but I
Yeah.
didn't think of myself as a quilter.
Mhm.
And then we went through the time when our son died and I quit sewing.
Mm.
And because the last thing I'd made was his coming home from the hospital outfit, and he didn't come home from the hospital. And
Mm.
um, so I couldn't do it again. I walked when I after I was home, I couldn't. In fact, I packed all the sewing stuff up and put it away. I did
Mhm.
become an obsessive knitter in the meantime because I'm
Yeah.
like very ADHD. And all of our kids were homeschooled. So I had to have something because like when you're teaching the 4th and 5th kid to read, it is mind-numbingly boring. So I had
Right.
to have something to do with my hands while they're
Yeah.
reading through a book. I'm like, I mean, I cranked out a lot of sweaters during that time. I was an obsessive knitter, but I didn't sew for about 5 years. And
Okay.
then I decided I wanted to sew again. I got my machine out and I was like, I think I want to get a new machine. And my husband was like, absolutely, get a new machine. And I went and I bought a Bernina 830, which was an
Mm.
absolutely mothership machine. It was, it's really big. In fact, it's still sitting way back there. It's sitting on my thing because I'm actually getting ready to sell it because I got a new Bernina a couple months ago. I got a 790,
Ooh.
and which I really, a 790 plus, I guess, which I really like as well because that one was getting a little older.
Yeah.
And I made a quilt and I really enjoyed it. And then I went and bought a long arm a month
Mhm.
later because, in for a penny, in for a pound.
Right. Why not?
I know, because I made the quilt and then I quilted it all on my 830. And then I was like, this is not very much fun putting a king size quilt through a domestic machine.
Yeah.
Not so much fun. And my place had a long arm and I went and I tried it. And he was like, and I said, I'll buy it. And
Mhm.
he was like, what? And I said, was that the easiest sale you've ever made for a long arm? And that's actually the
Uh,
long arm I still have right now, which is a handy quilter Avante. It's over there. I'm
okay.
actually getting ready to sell it because I am upgrading and getting Bernina long arm.
Okay. They're
Um,
nice.
yeah, but I've loved my Avante. It has served me well
Mhm.
over the years. In fact, so well that I became one of the handy quilter spokespeople for a while.
Oh, wow.
And I was blown up and put on the side of their building along with 5 other people, and we did lots of stuff, and that was
Mm.
fun. But it wasn't. It also wasn't a good fit because
Mhm.
that's where things kind of switched. I actually had I had a blog at the time called the Long Arm Virgin, which is I just
Mhm.
took people along with learning the long arm because I
Sure.
didn't. The place I bought my long arm from went out of business exactly 2 weeks after I bought my long arm. Yes.
Okay. That sounds legit.
You know what? They just didn't tell anybody they were going to go out of business. And so, I mean, so I bought my
Me.
long arm, plunked down the big dollars,
Yeah.
and so I didn't get any support.
Yeah.
And it turned out right at the time that's when Handy Quilter was having a contest, and a different thing, and you wrote your story about it, and then they picked you, and I got to be one of the people who was picked. And
Mhm.
but I had to teach myself how to do it because the nearest next handy quilter dealer was like in Atlanta.
Okay.
And that just wasn't possible for me to go to on a regular basis because we still had kids home, homeschooling, all the
Right.
things.
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I started.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I
Yeah.
mean, some heartbreak in there, but like really
Absolutely.
cool that you were able to refuel yourself and find your love for it again. Cause
I did,
like,
and I did not know if that would come back. I mean, because I really didn't want, and there was just one day where I was just like, it didn't hurt so much to see the sewing machine.
mhm,
Um, and so I was like, okay, and then I pulled it back out and refound my passion. And from there, I found um the passion for really representing politically liberal folk within the quilting sphere because pretty quickly I found a lot of pushback in the quilting world.
mhm,
And that was like, that's weird, but there was definitely bright lights out there because like the first person I had on my blog was my friend Karen McTavish. And
mhm,
I mean, and she is a badass quilter if there ever was one. I mean, she is like OG
yeah,
and she's amazing. And so there were people out there, but where I lived and in the sphere that when you start stepping out there, it can be difficult.
mhm. Yeah, for sure. And I think, you know, experiencing that as well, like not wanting to be that, not be that like white conservative, like, I mean, I'm clearly a white girl, but
Yeah, there's
like,
no getting around that one. Yep.
right? Like, sorry, this is just
Yeah.
what I look.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
just
mean,
like not wanting to uphold that ideal that like you have to be this conservative voice in the community because there's so many more people out there to be represented.
they are. I mean, there are a lot of people, and then that's where when I by being vocal on my side, because there are, and the truth of the matter is that I don't like the word blessed. It's not a word for me, but I'm very lucky. I'm very
Hmm.
lucky. I'm lucky that I have a husband that had a really great job, which meant that I could start a platform with and be really true to myself and not worry about the income as much in
Hmm.
that way. And then to really be able to say the things that I believed and that other people were telling me and reflect those back for people who were not quite as brave or quite as open or able to do those things.
Hmm.
Because I mean, I truly believe that, I mean, the quote from Desmond Tutu is that if you are neutral in situations of injustice, that you have chosen the side of the oppressor. And I
Hmm.
just don't want to be known as, I don't want to be remembered as that person. History is really clear. I mean,
Yeah,
and there are tumultuous times, but when you stay quiet, you favor the oppressor. And I'm just not, I can't do that. And so
right,
whether that means I blow my business, to hell in a handbasket once, twice, or three times, that's just going to have to be the way it's going to be.
right. Yeah.
No.
And I think too, like I kind of found myself in this rut of like I was talking to some great people and, getting good people on the show and people I do admire their work. But then I'm like, I censored myself so much because I'm like, I need to be palatable for everyone. And,
I get
but,
that. I say about both my parents have passed, but I say that they're both rolling in their urns
mhm,
because they're just like, what? Where did we go wrong? I mean, and
right.
I am no different than I was when I was young. I mean, I've been baffling to them since the day
Hmm.
I opened my mouth. So I mean,
Yeah.
there's no real surprise there, and honestly, there is a little bit of freedom in that, in not having
Hmm.
that of course, I'm sad not to have them for my children and stuff like that. And but
Sure.
there is a thing that, there's a certain freedom in being able to truly be yourself without feeling that kind of oppression
Hmm.
or depression from them or disappointment or whatever
Right.
the case may be.
Yeah. 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 So then kind of around that time, as I was like contemplating that, reflecting that, like, who do I want to show up as? Do I want to be another vanilla
Mhm.
face in a sea of vanilla situations, or do I want to put some sprinkles on my vanilla and allow people a space to be themselves and advocate for that? And so that's kind of when I started seeing your stuff, and I follow Libs Elliott,
Yeah,
and
libs. Oh, I love libs.
yeah, yeah, and just, some others that I'm not gonna name drop everybody, but,
Sure.
that I'm like, if I wanna follow these people and be in cahoots with these people and talk to these people as well, like, I have to show up in my authenticity as well, and so, anyway, it just really spoke to me, and I just think this life is too short to sit back and stay quiet, and, if you feel passionately about something, or you want to live in your truth, then, like, do it out loud and do it in an informed way. And, I think this platform can be a tricky spot where people just spout whatever they think without actually having facts to back themselves up, and
Oh
that
yeah,
can be a
social
scary
media
thing too.
is, it's got its foibles. There's no doubt about it. But I
Sure.
said in a TikTok the other day, it was like kind of one of those things, what don't you know about me kind of thing. And I said that,
Mhm.
for as much trash as people give for social media, I actually adore social media from the fact that I would have never found all my people. I would never
Mhm.
have found people that I think about on the daily who are sitting in my phone, who, that we have each other's text numbers. And because there's one thing to have somebody's, to Instagram through talk to them or to what, but when you have somebody's actual phone number and you're texting back and forth,
Yeah.
just like, oddball shit that you hear during the day or see or think about them or whatever, and some of them are on the other side of the world that way.
Right.
I mean, I would not have those people in my life if it was not for social media. So, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, are there horrible things about social media? Absolutely, there are. And it can
Mhm.
be, it could be a seductive mistress. And you have to learn how to, and sometimes I'm really good and sometimes I'm not good. Like right now, I have this rule that because my daughter is just learning to drive again,
Mhm.
because anxiety it makes her anxious. And
Mhm.
but she has a full-time job, my youngest, and she just graduated from college, and so she's back living at home until she has some money saved up. And so I take her to work in the morning.
Mhm.
So my thing is that I don't touch my phone
Mhm.
unless it is, because I'm a neonatal kitten rescuer, unless it's and they know to do twice, and there's like a pattern, when they're
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
get hold of me, because I'm like, do not look at the phone in the morning, because I'm guilty. I'll sit down with a piece of toast in one hand and my phone in the
Mhm.
other. And then later, my toast is, stone cold. Because I
Yeah.
haven't, I have sunk into like, ooh, that's cool. What a great project. Ooh, I need to make a note about that. Ooh, I need to, or inspiration or whatever the
Mhm.
case may be. So I tried it. I try. Am I always great about it? No, no, I'm not always great about it. So I have to give myself, kind of rails to ride within that way,
Yeah.
because it'd be easy to do it. It's just like it's easy to do this job all the time because it's at home or it's,
Mhm.
so you just
Yeah.
have to make yourself some boundaries because otherwise it'll eat you up.
Yeah. No, for sure, and that is one thing I learned from, that I took from teaching, is definitely, like, setting time boundaries for myself, and it does help that the majority, like, the physical part of the business is out of my parents' house, and so I'd have to actually come over here all the
Mhm.
time to do that side of things, but I do get caught up in Instagram and, other socials and I'm like, "I gotta network, I gotta get more people on the show, I gotta do this, I gotta do that," and then it's like, "Oh, I'm ignoring my husband. Oh, I'm not doing the dishes. Oh, I haven't eaten," or, like,
Yeah.
just silly things because you get sucked in, like you said, and it's like, I think I think humans are incredibly innovative and incredibly smart, and I think that we are still on the cusp, like, still on the in the, like, baby stages of what social media can and will be. And
Mm.
so I think right now, even though it's been around for a while, I think it still takes time to work out all the craziness and the kinks, and, like, just like
Oh,
with
yeah.
anything, you gotta try it before you know the limits of all of it, and that's where then you can start to kind of boundary it in and decide how that interacts in your life. And
Sure. I think it's a lot like, should I be on that new platform? Should I,
Mhm.
if I'm on Instagram, should I be on TikTok? Should I be on Facebook? Should I be on Twitter? Should I be on, whatever the hell else is new that I don't know about yet because I'm 55 and I'm a little slower to, get there. It's really hard because in fact, this morning, I am a podcast slash business book junkie. And this morning I was listening to about AI and about, the
Mm,
chat bot and it writing, and they were talking about it like writing recipes now. And that made me think it could probably write quilt program. It could write quilt patterns. It writes blogs
probably.
now. It writes, but what do we suffer for the authenticity loss of that in our community? What, in 10 years from now, also doesn't mean that we won't have, we won't have jobs. We won't have,
Right.
what do all of those things mean? And sometimes I can get way too up in my head about all of that.
Hmm.
But it was really very interesting listening to how, because they're in right now, third generation AI in the chatbot, but fourth generation, when this next part comes, because they're refeeding, because the data that AI is using right now comes from 2020 and above.
Mm,
So from 2020 to 20, where we are now, that information is not within chatbot's ability right now, but that's just getting ready to be dropped into there. And that's
hmm.
totally going to change this. It's going to change the landscape. And we think about, oh, why would it change quilting? But we are such a socially driven platform now, whether for good
Hmm.
or bad. I mean, because the FOMO is real, the fear of missing out for a lot of people on, the next, block of the month, or Tula Pink's new fabric collection,
Hmm.
or whatever it is that really drives this industry. And it's because it's seen there on Instagram.
Hmm.
I mean, as a quilt shop owner, I used to own a quilt shop. I'm not sure if you knew that or not.
I didn't know that. Okay,
Did.
tell me more.
Did. I did. I owned a quilt shop here in Chattanooga, Tennessee called Spool.
Okay.
Spool, its first year out was was chosen for Better Homes and Gardens magazine as top quilt shop, one of the top quilt shops in the
Wow.
United States. We made it even into the small box on the cover of the magazine. Um,
Wow.
it was an amazing shop. I mean, and I can say that quite honestly, and without any shame. Anybody who was there, people would stop and gasp when they walked in because it was just truly, truly beautiful. I've got very, very, very firm feelings about quilt shops and working, and I used to, and I still do work with some quilt shop owners, but
Hmm.
you know, and we had it for 3 years, and then we things were changing. We had some family dynamics change. We had a lot of stuff, and it was just. And I was also running BadAss Quilters Society at the time, which was
Hmm.
also very busy. And we were launching into doing an event, and we were doing. There was lots of things going on, and so we decided to close the brick and mortar, and we did. And right now, I mean, do I miss it? Yes, because it was beautiful. It was stunning. It was really good.
Hmm.
But looking where we are now in the world, wow, I don't know how I feel about that, because quilt shops are falling left and right all over the place. And some people who are very big names who have quilt shops are bringing their quilt shops home and just going online only, because
Yeah.
that's where the profit margin is. I mean,
Hmm.
because having a roof over your head, a building and employees and stuff like that, it's very, very, very expensive.
Hmm.
And I would very much like quilting to be more egalitarian, and I think it can be, but it's not egalitarian and accessible from most quilt shops, because the cost of the fabric goods coming in and the cost to make a profit, because it's not a hobby. I mean, and that's a
Right.
problem that happens a lot of times. Quilt shop owners open up quilt shops because they love fabric. I mean,
Right.
that doesn't really, in the big scheme of things, that doesn't really make sense, because you have to be a very, very savvy business person
Hmm.
to do that. And I was very lucky. We did really, really financially well, and that's why people were like, "I cannot believe you're closing this." But sometimes there are life reasons to change paths. And
Yep.
that was mine. And we did not talk especially openly about it, because it was a family matter, and
Sure.
it was just not, it wasn't anybody's business.
Right.
But I loved having a quilt shop, and having people come and from across the United States and being featured in magazines and stuff like that. It was super fun.
Yeah.
It was good, but it's a lot of
Yeah.
work. I've never
Yeah.
I've never met a quilt shop owner who gets to quilt more when they have a shop. In fact, some of them stop quilting altogether almost if they have a successful shop.
Right. Like, who's got the time for that?
Yeah, I know it is. You're hiring somebody to quilt and make stuff and do stuff for the shop, but your chance to sit home and play with some fabric is pretty rare.
Yeah. That's kind of the bummer side of like running a quilting business, even small, it's just me and my mom. And, even still, it's like, oh, when do I have time to sew for myself? And
Mm.
we're just busy enough, which is fantastic. I'm so grateful for it and I'm happy. It's just like, oh, right, I need to carve out time for myself. But yeah, it's like you think, oh, I'm gonna just get to sit and sew all the time. And although I do, because we're making quilts for people, but
But it's
it's
not your
not
quilt.
it's not for me. I have to put that in a box and ship it across the United States or to Canada or wherever it's going.
Absolutely.
And it feels good that we're helping people's quilty dreams come true, but at the same time, I'm like, I have a stack of projects piling up because I just am not getting to them. But so I
It
can
is
only
hard that
imagine that.
way. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why actually I've gone back to knitting, because that's something that's just totally for me. And it has,
Hmm.
because there is always this drive when you are in this world to monetize whatever the hell you're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, and then, I mean, and you can't pick up something without, or have a new product or look at something without going, oh, I really should share this with my people. So now I have to
Right.
go and like clear a place on my desk and take artistic shots and write a swell caption that's going to attract things so that the metrics are good. So people want it. And then you're always just like, oh, I can't just
Mm.
have a thing
Yeah.
anymore.
Can't just enjoy your new tool for you. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, oh, I need to show everyone that I'm using this thing now. It's like,
Mhm. And sometimes you really, because you want to share it because you're like, oh my God, this is really, really cool. I mean, because like I got a really great when I had my shop, I got two rotator cuff tears
oh
from,
gosh.
well, and because as you probably well know, there's like long arming, those repetitive movements and the stuff like that. It's very tough on the body. It
Hmm.
is very, very, very hard on the body, and cutting fabric all the time. So you're doing this,
Yep.
and I was like, I had two terrible shoulder pains. I mean, but I hadn't fallen, I wasn't doing anything athletic. And I go and I see, and they do the MRI and whatever else, and he's like, you have two rotator cuff tears. He said, but they're both different. He says you have a blah 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 for this side and a blah 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 for that side. And I was like, and he said, what do you do for a living? I was like, I'm a pole dancer. No. And I said, I cut fabric for a living. And he said, how? And I said, well, I have this wheel that's like a rolling razor blade, and I go like this. And he
Mhm.
said, oh, he said, this makes sense. He said, but what do you do with this arm then? And I said, I flip bolts of fabric,
Uh-huh.
because when you're putting out the fabric, you're flip, flip, flip.
Mhm.
And that rotation in the shoulder, especially when
It's
the
just
bolts are
so
heavy, especially when you've got a big new bolt and a bolt of fabric, you're really supporting all that weight in one arm. It's
yeah.
traveling up cuff tear on both sides.
Oh
So
my gosh.
I know, but so my friends at Fomora have a new rotary cutter that I really do love. And that's where I've
Mhm.
come with my personal thing is like, unless I'm going to stand up upside down and cheerlead something, I'm not going to talk about it, because I
Right.
do get stuff sent to me, and I do see cool things out there, because, I have wholesale abilities to get into stuff like that. So I see stuff, and I'm not going to necessarily, do that. But like their new rotary blade has a ball bearing on the inside, and
Oh.
it's sweet. It is really sweet. It is like effortless cutting. You think your regular one is effortless, but you know how like when you open up a rotary cutter, there's like a little spring in there.
Mhm.
Well, that holds the pressure against the blade, well, which causes a certain amount of drag. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just the way it's designed. Well, they redid it, and the first time I did it, I was like, oh wow. And then it was really cool. So I got to talk to them about it, and the fact, so like the other day I shared about it. I mean, I don't make a
Yeah.
commission on it. I don't do anything that way. And not that I wouldn't, because there are times that I monetize those kind of things, or I'm an
Yeah.
affiliate, or whatever. And I go, absolutely, I disclose that. I'm like, I'm here shilling for these people, but only because I love it. And that's
Right.
where you have to have the trust of your community, so that they know that you're not going to, because there have been times where I've really loved a product, and then like 4 months into it, I'm like, there's a problem. And I'll come back
Mhm.
and say, I know I told you I really love this product, and it's good for all these, but this is the problem I'm having right now. And then I'll go forward and I'll say, I'm addressing this with the company, and they've been really great about it. And we're going to resolve this. And this is something, there's probably just a manufacturer defect in this one. Or I'll talk about they have not been responsive, you
Mm.
know, and so I really try to be as upfront about those things as possible, along with,
Yeah,
like when things just go terribly, because they go
sure.
terribly sometimes in quilting. Oh, terrible.
Oh, oh, don't they? Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, and because I think we show all the sweet stuff online. We show the
Mhm,
good stuff. We show now like my quilt points are never going to come together. I can honest to goodness promise you that my quilt points are never. This is why I'm an art quilter, not
mhm,
what I call a geometric quilter.
sure.
Because I really love that end of it. And I am just really bollocks at doing precision pointing. I can really do it, but I don't like it. It stresses me out.
Mhm,
It doesn't put me in my happy place. So, I mean, I think people don't know a lot about that is that they think quilting is just one thing.
right.
If they try one thing, so like if the only thing you've ever been taught is, or somebody tried to teach you paper piecing and you hate it, maybe you like art quilting, or maybe you like whole cloth quilting, or maybe you like something else. So,
Yeah,
so you got to try all the things
yeah,
and see what
yeah,
makes you
and I think, yeah, there's so many skills that you can try that are quilting, no matter, like you were saying, paper piecing or traditional piecing or, applique or just
happy.
the art aspect of it all is like that's the one thing I do love is that there's like so many entry points into this craft and there's like low what is it? What am I trying to say? Low barrier to entry if you really want to get into it because I think it can be overwhelming with all the tools and all the gadgets and all the things,
Yeah.
but it's like no, go get yourself $100 machine and get some fabric you can practice with and just try different things until you find what you love.
That's what I love about children. A lot of people do not love teaching children. I love kids because they are just not afraid.
Yeah.
They're not bringing all the baggage to the party. What I say is like kids
Mhm.
bring nothing. They just bring their enthusiasm. Adults who haven't done something bring a full set of Samsonite. It is all
Mhm.
the baggage that they have ever had. Any ugly thought somebody has dropped and left in their head, they bring it, and they bring all that insecurity to
Mhm.
learning. Now, there's some people who just dive in and they get it and that's all that, but so many people bring, they bring that thing that that art teacher said that you're not artistic. They bring,
Right.
all those things with them. Whereas like kids are like, I'll push that button on that machine and see what it does,
Mhm.
and they're
Yeah,
like,
they're like,
whereas other ones are like, I'm so scared. I've never even done that on my machine. People who don't like, and she's just, if she ever hears that, she'll recognize, she said she did not know her machine went in reverse for like 5 years
"Oh,
because nobody had ever
okay."
mentioned it, and she never
Yeah.
touched that button. And so she was like getting to the I went over and she's a friend and she was like, I can't figure out how to fix this thing. And I said, okay, well, show me what you're doing. And she does, and then she takes and she rotates the whole thing around to go back in the other direction and I was like, is your reverse button broken? And she went, oh, this machine doesn't have something like that. She said it's too expensive. And I went, see that little button with the U and the arrow? She's like, that's what that does.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, and I was like, how long have you had this machine? She was like, 5 years.
Oh, that's
I laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. But and good naturedly because she was like, I can't believe I just never. She says, I've been so intimidated by this machine.
mhm.
And so there's so much, that we don't try sometimes that we just
Yeah.
dig. I always say it's just fabric. It's
Mhm.
just fabric. If you do the worst thing possible to it, light it on fire in the backyard then. I mean, you know
Yeah.
what? What's the big deal? If you
Yeah.
totally botch it up, light it on fire or compost it or keep going and then, wrap something up in it. Whatever you're gonna do, it's just fabric.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's that is kind of I mean, and I'm laughing because I relate. I used to be so scared of my machine, not mine specifically, I guess, but just growing up because my mom, again, she just like you, she would sew stuff for us. She'd sew clothes. She would, Mom, I need a new set of curtains. She'd make us curtains and whatever, and she made my formal dress, some of my formal dresses like through high school and stuff. But anyway, I had so much anxiety around breaking her machine that I just would never, I would like maybe do like a tiny project where I knew I wasn't gonna like mess anything up. But
Mm.
it took like being a teacher and teaching kids, like if I was like, if I'm gonna preach to these kids that they have to just try shit, like you just
Uh,
gotta try it. Um, I should probably be willing to do the same thing.
yeah.
And the more I've like, gone to therapy and done a bunch of work on my anxiety, the less
Mm.
fear I'm holding on to and the easier it is for me to just like click buttons and try stuff. Like, well, if I can do something, I can undo it. So like, why not just try everything?
That really is it. I mean, and that's, I mean, because like I suffer from a lot of anxiety also. And but it's one of the things that this is not one of those places that it shows up for me, oddly enough. But like,
Mhm.
I taught myself to sew by reading the book, and nobody was telling me I did it wrong. But honestly, in fact, I wrote a post about it years ago. It's still up on the blog, probably is like, it's like it says, be you not the asswipe who kills somebody's sewing mojo. And because you know what, there's so many people out there who are like, they say, oh, I had this horrible sewing teacher in high school and she just ruined and she just made me hate it. And we have sewing teachers now who do that to people. They just make them
Mhm.
feel like such failures. And
Mhm.
it's just like, do not be that person. I mean,
Right.
there's nothing that can happen. I mean, quite frankly, short of like shoving the machine off the desk,
Yeah.
there's really no way to break it. I mean, and my
Right.
mother-in-law was very nervous. I gave, because I love, so like right back in there, that's the 6 needle embroidery machine. And I've got
Oh,
other
okay.
embroidery machines as well, because I used to be an embroidery designer. And so one of my early embroidery machines, I gave it to my mother-in-law. And she was at first just terrified of it. And I told her, I mean, one day I told her, I said, unless you knock it off the
Yeah.
desk, you're not going to break it. You might get a thread jam, but that can be
Right.
fixed. There's nothing that can't be fixed on this machine from the extent
Mhm.
of what you're going to do to it. I
Right.
mean,
It's not like
worst
she's
case
gonna
scenario,
open it up.
yeah, I mean, she wasn't. And I hate I'm always so sad about the amount of people who somebody else is really, throwing a bucket of water on their joy for
Mhm.
sewing. And I hear so many of those people who like, and sometimes, I mean, yes, there are things that make a quilt easier to long arm. Yes, knowing how to put your borders on so that they're not like waving like a prom queen. I mean,
Yeah, right.
I know,
Flapping in the breeze.
I know, flapping in the breeze. I mean, and so back when I was long arming for people, I mean, I would say, I mean, and honestly, the reason I got a long arm is because I didn't really trust my own quilting to give it to somebody else because I was nervous. So basically, I spent $20,000 to not be nervous. A
You
long
know?
arm so I could do it myself. And I learned a lot about quilting in that time and where
Mhm.
you can cheat and where you can't cheat. Because
Mhm.
there's lots of things that you can cheat, but I'd be like, okay. And the nice part about like technology now was that I could send a video to somebody and say, because I'd mount it up on the thing, I'd say, okay, so what we have here is we have a lot of fullness
Mhm.
here. And I said, I'm going to guess that this is how you put your strips on your side of your quilt. And basically, there's probably 3, 4, 5 more inches of fabric actually than the length of the side of your quilt. And so that's making it ripple. I said, we have a couple different ways we can fix this based on your quilt. We can either take a tuck in it so it's going to look like a
Mhm.
seam, or I'm going to
Mhm.
send it back to you and you're going to unpick all of these, your borders off, and I'm going to show you, what you can do. We can do either
Yeah.
one of those. It's okay. We're going to fix it
Mhm.
one way or another.
Right.
Of course, and every other, hint and tip out there for, getting fullness out, like, using the starch, putting, have you ever done the thing where you put the soup cans on the quilt?
Uh, I've not put soup cans, but I've used my hands to kind of,
I have a
yeah,
friend
soup
who taught
soup
years
can the
ago,
quilt.
yeah, you put soup cans on it and that
Mhm.
holds, that tension on it so that you can get some of that fullness out of there. Or, I've been like, okay, you wanted this batting, but you've got a lot of fullness. I mean, I said, how like bras come in A cup and B cup and D cup, so when we look at this, but we could put another layer of batting under it and that'll take up some of the fullness. So, that's going to be an
Mhm.
added cost. We're going to talk about that and stuff like that. And then
Right.
people very rarely make that mistake again. And if they do,
Right.
they know what they are, I'm going to be like, this is extra batting, it's extra time on my part, so it's going to be an extra charge. I can give it back to you and let you resolve those matters, you know. And I think only once out of all those times did somebody want to resolve it. They're like, nope, I'm done with that quilt. And
Hmm.
I'm going to learn more going forward. Very few people want to go back and take off their borders.
Yeah, they're like, I'll do it next time. This time you do it.
Yeah. And this, and I'm like, and you're going to charge for it too, to
Yep.
fix,
Yep.
because, this isn't a kindness sport. And
No.
that's a really big other thing for me, is that as women in the business, we can't give away our talent. We can't
Nope.
give it away for no money. And so everything has a cost
Hmm.
of doing it
Yeah.
in that way. And so if I'm going
Yeah.
to fix your mistake, I'm going to lovingly fix it after I've talked to you, and I'm not going to shame you for it, but you are going to pay me,
Hmm.
you
Right.
know.
Like, it's okay, this happened, but
Mhm.
also my time is valuable, and because I'm having to stop this process to do this thing, it
Mhm.
costs money. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
because and especially when you're doing a service, it's hard to value your time,
Mhm.
like, it's hard to figure out that out, but I think whatever you decide that is, as long as you stick to your guns and just say like, "Hey, this is what I'm charging," and don't let people talk you into backing down or whatever, feel like you owe somebody a discount, like,
Yeah. No,
that's like
that's the whole industry though. That's the
mhm,
deep end of the industry. And that's really how Badass was kind of, came to into play, was when a company that I was working for, basically I'd already signed a contract with them to do promotion and do some stuff like that. And then they're like, hey, we've seen some stuff on your blog that we don't like, and you're going to have to take those things down if you're going to keep working with our company. And I was like, no, that's not going to happen. I was like,
yeah.
do you not look ahead of time? I mean, did you not thoroughly vet this process? And they're like, oh, well, then we're going to enact our moralities clause. And because I had stuff about reproductive rights, I had stuff about,
Mm,
sexuality, I had different stuff on my thing, because I am a very strong social advocate. And I was like, okay, fine, I'm gonna, they're like, well, if your lawyer calls us, we'll just, I was like, no, I don't need to be part of your company if that's how your company is going to be. And that's okay. And that is
yeah,
one of the things that I have really given up,
mhm,
taking this
yeah,
position as a vocal advocate in this thing. There are not a lot of quilt brands who want to align with me,
mhm,
because they are afraid of alienating other people, their other
right,
base, and that's their right. I mean, I'm not going to
mhm,
say, oh, they're so bad, but what I will say is that when they come to me in private and say, we really love what you're doing, but we can't, it's too dangerous for us. It's too dangerous for our bottom line. We can't do this. That's
yeah,
that's a little hard. That's a little hard to
yeah,
take. And it's
yeah,
their right too, but you know, it is what it is. And so that's why, if I'm doing Badass Quilters Society, it has to be member driven, or it has to
mhm,
be merchandise driven.
mhm,
There's only two ways that that's going to happen. And that's really where some of the new merchandise, and like the new stickers, and which really double down on what the community is.
yeah.
Um,
I
so that's
freaking love them.
They're so fun.
I'm
In fact, I'm waiting. That's why I'm like, good. If the dogs start barking, it's the UPS man, because we have more
mm,
stickers coming. And like yesterday was just Monday. So Sunday night, we launched the new stickers late Sunday night, and overnight Sunday night, so Monday we sent out 500 stickers and sticker packs. And
yeah.
then we have like another 300 that have to go out by tomorrow morning. Um, so
That's so exciting. Well,
yeah,
they're
so that's
so
fun.
stinking cute, and, like, I just was like I literally was like, "Okay, I'm gonna buy something because I love all of it, and I'm, like, really wanting to put more stickers on my machine. Because I still have my little, like, starter brother. It's not, like, their lowest machine, but it's, like, their $100 model or whatever.
If
I
it
can't
sews,
remember
it
the
sews.
numbers.
If
Right,
it sews,
exactly.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. I mean, because
No.
I've had like everything from, like $100 machines up to,
Mhm.
$12,000 machines. And,
Right.
and is there a difference? Absolutely. There's a difference. There's a difference.
Sure.
If it sews, it sews. And,
Mhm.
and I don't love the snobby culture. I mean, there are things that I really love about my Bernese, because I do a lot of heirloom sewing and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And so I get a lot more precision for stuff like that. But I don't like the snobby culture part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's really hard, and something I would love to see change about the quilt world is that the problem is that when it comes to sewing machines and like sewing machine dealers, is that there is almost no profit in selling machines that are under like $300.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking like $47 profit. It is so
Yeah.
close to the line for those sewing machine dealers that it's very difficult. Now, I really believe that that's like bringing in a customer. If you really serve your customer well, then
Hmm.
hopefully for you as a business, they'll come and they'll buy their notions there. They'll buy, they'll come take your classes, and that they will step up to bigger machines over time.
Right.
I think everybody deserves to have a machine, because there really is a true difference between a machine you buy at a big box store and one you buy at the dealer. Even if you buy, what I tell people is that either find a used machine
Hmm.
or get a lower end machine, the lowest end machine you can get at a dealer, because at least you're going to have somebody, and it's made differently. Then
Hmm.
you're going to have somebody to stand behind you. Hopefully, if you have a good dealer. Now, if the dealer is horrible while you're there, don't buy from them.
Yeah.
If they're
Like, you
snobby,
don't have to take that treatment.
no, absolutely. If
Yeah.
they're horrible, don't do that. And do go to a big box store and buy one off, or order it off of, Amazon or whatever, because they don't
Hmm.
deserve your business.
No,
And,
exactly. And I
uh,
think the way we're going to change the climate of the industry is by saying, no, you don't get to treat me this way and still get my business. And I think for so long it's just like, well, I'm your only option, so you have to shop with me. It's like, and
not
thankfully for
anymore.
the internet, and yeah, and for the World Wide Web, we've got access to everywhere all the time. And
Mm,
so you can shop differently. And yeah, I was just looking for like something to get me started because I didn't want to invest in a hefty machine if I wasn't going to keep quilting or sewing. And so I just bought what I could. And
mhm.
yeah, the thing sews like a dream. I've had it for 6 years and it still works perfectly. Like, haven't
Yep,
really had to do any maintenance on it except clean it out every once in a while. And
it's doing what you
you know,
need it to do. I mean,
exactly.
and that's the important part. And I really love that when I was teaching a lot, having like this wide variety of older machines, newer machines, because like I still have
Hmm.
the original Bernina that my mom sewed my baby clothes on and that I learned to sew on. I still have that
Yeah.
thing as a workhorse. It is like
Hmm.
it's amazing. If I have to get out and do some stuff, and it's a very coveted machine now because it's all
Hmm.
mechanics on the inside, weighs like a dead body. It is so
Yeah.
heavy. If
My
you drop
mom's is too.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a really, really good machine. And I can
Hmm.
appreciate each machine for what it brings to the table. I mean, and
Yeah.
any machine that brings somebody into sewing, I mean, I think the only time that becomes hard is if people get a machine that has not been done, has not been cared for well or whatever. And
Hmm.
so it's like shredding thread all the time, or it's doing all these things. It's like they tend to think it's them. And I'm like, oh no, there's
Hmm.
just something wrong with your machine. This is
Yeah. Go
not
get it
you.
serviced.
This is not, and that gets a little trickier too, because servicing $100 machine when it costs $75 to $90 just to walk in and get a machine serviced now, it's like
Yeah.
you want to go find a new machine or borrow one.
Yeah.
Because I tell people all the time is I said, get on your social media and shout out and say, hey, I'd love to learn to sew. Does anybody have a machine I can borrow for a while? Because there are
Hmm.
tons of people with like me who have extra machines sitting around. There are moms and grandmas who have extra ones sitting in backs of closets.
Hmm.
I always tell my friends who, especially if they have an active church community, it's just spread it in the church community, and somebody's going to put a machine in your hands.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then it's good that way. I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. We have, that little brother is my personal machine, but we do have Berninas for our business. And it's different. And my mom's Bernina 930 that she's had since, I don't know, before I was born.
Mhm.
Same thing, weighs like dead body, but it works like a charm. And, you know, it's, you can't beat it. Even like we have newer machines. We have an Artista 730 and then we have the 535,
Mhm.
and they're great. They work well, they sew fantastically. And again,
Mhm.
that precision you can really dial in. But yeah, it's like
Mhm.
there's something to be said for something that just so straight.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's the reason really people get like things like, like a Juki, like even like if you really are, I mean, an only a quilter, just an only quilter,
Mhm.
don't even need zigzag. I mean,
Yeah.
wicked fast. I mean, I have a friend who makes all of her stuff on a featherweight, because
Mm.
she's a quilter, that and she's putting off stuff, and then like a friend who's got like a Juki, which is
Mhm.
wicked fast, because we had two back when we had the shop, we had two, and I mean, so fast, so
Yeah.
fast. I mean, it's
That's what
crazy.
I've heard.
Uh-huh. It is. It's scary fast. Luckily, it has an adjustable, so you can like even if you floor it, you can adjust it. That's one of the things I say when because people are all to me all the time like, my kid really wants to sew. My kid's
Mhm.
7, my kid's 10. I said, what should I look for in a machine? I said, there's a lot of things to look for, but the first thing you want to look for is speed control on
Yep.
that machine. Because if you can turn down the speed control, even if they floor it, they're not gonna sew. And people are like, oh, they're gonna put a needle through their finger. I said, if that's the worst thing that ever happened to them though, that's not
Mhm.
so bad. I mean, yeah,
Right.
and I've had kids who've done it. I've had a kid who sewed through their finger in a sewing at a class I was teaching, and
Ouch.
yeah, and she went, and
It's
I spun,
shocking.
I spun around, and her finger was down there, and I was like, okay, I want you to start breathing, and I'm gonna turn this wheel back around, and we're gonna do this
Mhm.
thing. And it did. It went right through her finger. I do not know how she got her finger in there. She must have really, because we talked a lot about it. And there
Mhm.
were tears. And there were, but and I was like, do we, we're gonna call mom, we're gonna tell her what happened, we're gonna talk, and she said, but I don't want to leave. I want to finish my project. I said, "Okay, well,
Oh.
we're gonna call mom. We're still gonna tell mom about your finger and let mom have a chance to come up here and talk to you and stuff like that." But she finished her project. We
Wow.
bandaged her up and she talked to mom, and mom was like, and I knew mom. So mom, had a
Mhm.
fair trust. She's like, she said, well, you've had so many kids. Do you think I need to take? I was like, no. I said, but we do need to watch it. I mean, but the needle's clean and the thread is clean. And I said,
Mhm.
but what you need to do at home. I am lucky. I have put one through my fingernail before. Sometimes I have long nails, and I
Mm.
have, but I did that on the long arm. Um,
Oh.
and people are
Woof.
like, but I'm like, these people are always like, oh, is that fabric that seam too thick? I'm like, people, these machines can go through your finger and through your bone. I
Yeah.
mean, most of the time, the reason it's going to break a needle on a heavy seam is because the needle is going to deflect.
Yeah.
It's try to take a path through there. It's going to try to find the least resistance. And so it's going to bang into the plate. It's not the
Mhm.
fabric. It's not those 6 layers of fabric that are the problem.
No.
It's needle deflection. So yeah,
Mhm.
so don't think that, your finger is going to magically stop that, from happening.
No. I
Yeah.
was I was stitching something, I don't know, but it was at the quilt shop. I've been working at a quilt shop for a little while and I'm quitting that because too many things on my plate. But I was seaming a backing for a client quilt, a customer quilt. And so, of course I'm using one of the Berninas and it had the I don't even know what they're called, but
Oh,
like the attachment arm where you can push it with your knee and it will
the knee
raise the
lift
presser
and
for
the knee lift.
yeah, the knee
Uh-huh.
lift. Yeah, so the knee lift was on and it was just like a chaotic little timing where my knee bumped it while I was still sewing and pushing the fabric through,
Raised it up.
and it just pierced the skin on the side of my finger though, like, it went all the way through, but it didn't touch my fingernail. It didn't do any, like, hard damage. It was just, like, through the skin on my finger, and I was just like I went and I, like, got my finger out and I ran to the bathroom and they were like when I came back out, they were like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "Yeah, I pierced my finger with the needle." They're like, "What? Do you need to go?" I'm like, "No, it just went through the skin. Like I could literally stick an earring through it if I wanted to." And they were like, "Gross." I'm like, "I mean, I'm not going to, but like that's what
Not going.
happened." And yeah,
I'll try to explain to you what's going on here. Yeah.
yeah, like it didn't hurt or anything. It was just
Uh-huh.
like shocking and then it was gushing blood for a minute. But yeah, anyway, that's like the worst thing that's happened to me, knock on wood so
Knock
far,
on
but
wood.
I'm just like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I've gotten to where I've been like, ooh, that was probably kind of close. I've done it when I was, because you're like playing thread chicken, like,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
with a long arm or something like that. So I've been like, like I said, my nails were longer at that time, and I did go straight down through a fingernail, and
Wow.
but that was enough to. Whoo, but I use a
Yeah.
lot of power tools because I'm like,
Mm.
we have an old house and I'm remodeling it, In fact, right now back behind me, I'm cutting a template for fretwork. I'm building a fretwork piece, and I'll be hand
Oh,
carving it. After I cut it, I'll be carving the fretwork. And so I use a lot of
wow.
power tools, big
Mhm.
guns, big, all kinds of stuff. So I'm very aware of the danger of those kind of things. So I'm really
Mhm.
careful, but it's never stopped me, because like when my kids were little, when they were 3, they all started sewing when they were about 3.
Yeah.
And so, because honestly, because it kept them near me and out of, I put another machine there and let
Mhm.
them doodle around on it, to keep them busy so that I could sew
Yeah.
some. You
Yeah.
know, when you got that
Yeah.
many kids around, it's like,
Gotta keep them occupied.
I know,
Yeah.
keep them occupied so that they're not doing something, heinous that way.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah,
they also
for sure.
now, they can sew. Now my oldest daughter actively sews when she's kind of in that kind of thing. And then,
Yeah.
but they all can sew. All my sons can sew.
Nice. It's such a
And
good skill to have.
it is a good skill. I always say, in fact, I've got a design I'm working on about sewing, being my dystopian life skill.
Yeah, for sure. I'm like, listen,
Yeah.
if anything weird happens, I can make clothes, I can keep us warm. I've got the
Yep.
skills for that.
I
Running
can.
and shooting stuff, can't do that.
Somebody else can do that while you're sewing a tent, while you're
Yeah,
making,
exactly.
I mean, because
Yeah.
it really is. I mean, it's really funny because we talk about like all these other things that we should teach our kids, but especially in a time where clothing is expensive to buy now. We
Mhm.
don't look that we're going to be going back into a less expensive time. So, a ripped out hem on pants, when you're supposed to be going to, a meeting or whatever,
Mhm.
that's an issue. And if you know how to fix that kind of stuff, you are so much further ahead than the person who has to, buy something on credit or can't have what they need and stuff like that. So I really
Mhm.
think of it as just a very solid life skill
Mhm.
for girls and boys and theys and she's and everybody's, so
Yep.
that, that they have just this other skill in their pocket to
Mhm.
be able to do these things.
Yeah, because it's like you never know when you're gonna be alone and need, a button sewed on or your
Yeah.
pants hemmed or, you ripped the crotch out. Like, okay, well,
Yeah.
let's sew it back together for a minute, until we can make a more permanent solution. But yeah, it's crazy. Like, it's crazy that they're like removing home ec and like all these life skill things
Hmm.
from just the knowledge base that kids are getting in schools. And
Yeah.
I'm just grateful that I had that. Like, I got home ec in junior high, but also I was homeschooled until ninth grade, and so I also
Really.
was around it all the time. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So we all of us were homeschooled for at least some duration. My youngest brother is the only one who stayed homeschooled. It was like a homeschool co-op thing, but he stayed homeschooled his whole K-12, but the rest of us went to public school. Uh, my brother, who's closest to me in age, he's a year younger. We went in ninth and eighth grade, and then my little sister, she started in ninth grade as well. But
How many of there are you?
there's 4 of us.
There's 4. Got it.
Yeah, I'm the oldest,
Uh-huh.
and then I've got the 2 brothers in the middle, and then my baby sister, she just turned 22. So
Oh, wow. Yeah,
yeah.
that's our span. Yeah. Most of our kids, they got up to like ninth or 10th grade, and then a lot of them started college then.
Mm,
And so they just went because we had an accelerated college program at our, local university where, younger kids could start there. And then some of them, did that for a little bit and then went off into their careers. And then some of them went, and like my youngest just graduated this past spring and, from college with her degree. And so they all just kind of took different paths that way. But, and like I said, none of them would be afraid to sit down at a machine. Would they do it for their own, joy at this point? I mean, maybe not, but they definitely
right.
know that they can fix something at this
Mhm.
point. They don't have any intimidation about doing that. So
Yeah.
I figure I've done my job if they're not intimidated by it.
Yeah.
I mean, my oldest actually told me that when he left, because he basically, he hit the road running when he was 18. My oldest was like, "I've moved." I was like, "Yeah, no, I didn't think you were putting your underwear in the back of your car because you wanted to." He'd been sneaking stuff out into the back of his car for a week. He thought we
Oh.
did, and he moved to be with his girlfriend.
Mm,
and that went the way it usually happens when you're 18.
sure.
But he worked on a high power line construction crew. They built the high
Oh,
power towers and stuff like that. And the guys would very often they would wear like those Carhartt jumpers and stuff like that.
mhm.
Very, very expensive. Those things are terribly expensive, but they
Yeah.
rip them a lot because they'd be up
Oh,
on things like that. And so he would repair them for them and he charged them.
oh,
That's how he made
good.
extra money.
Good for him.
I was
He's
like,
like,
Mom,
yeah,
I'm so
but
proud. I'm gonna be so
yeah,
proud of you.
no, I love that. And it's like, yeah, why not? Especially, yeah, stuff like that that's so expensive. It's like, why go buy a brand new one when someone you know
Yeah.
can fix it for you? Or, if you're willing to learn something in a couple minutes, like it really isn't that hard to learn how to repair something quickly and you need
No,
to
it's
do it.
not really hard. And the thing that I often say is that if 5-year-olds in foreign countries can do it for
Yeah.
a living all day long against their will, you damn well can put on a button.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm like, you have a
Yeah.
PhD, you can put on a button. I'm sorry.
Hmm. Yeah.
And although I say that, but I'm like, because I'm a big thrift store person, I love thrift stores, and
Mm.
I love finding like really amazing clothes there. And usually it's because like, I found a $500 coat, it was missing a button. It was just missing a button.
You're like, okay.
And I'm like, please, thank you very much. 5.99, 5.99. It's missing a button.
Okay.
That's why somebody did it. They probably, I
Yeah.
mean, there could be another reason, but I often find like jackets, like ski jackets with broken zippers.
Yeah.
I'm
Mm.
like, dude, that's just an out of line tooth. Let's just fix that. And it,
Yeah.
you know, yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, I like that, and I like the empowering aspect of it. I mean, because
Mhm.
that's really at the heart of what BadAss Quilter Society is really empowering people to be able to sit within themselves and broadcast that in the way that they're most comfortable with others. Because I kind of think of like having a badass quilter bag or the sticker on your car or whatever as you kind of your quiet signal to the world. It
Mhm.
was really great at like quilt shows and stuff like that because then people find each other.
Yeah. Like, ooh,
Which
I
I
see
really
that.
like. Uh-huh. Yeah, and they do. That's exactly what they do is like, oh my gosh, and
Yeah.
even more fun for me is people take pictures of people at quilt stores, at shows and stuff like that with the bags, with the swag, with the t-shirts, with the different stuff like that,
Yeah.
and send it to me. And they're like, I found another badass quilter, you
Yeah.
know. So that's really fun because at the heart, it's about building a community. And that the
Mhm.
community is something that I think we tend to lack. That's a little bit harder to put together, especially like those of us I live in the deep South. And
Mhm.
so living in the deep South right now and being politically liberal is challenging. But I have
Mhm.
this amazing community of people who we've all found each other that way.
Yeah.
I mean, my next
Yeah.
hope would really be is to be able to put together badass quilter like meetups for people,
Yeah.
because a lot of people do not feel comfortable in their local guilds.
Mhm.
And like, I've heard so many stories of people that are like, even right down to even guilds that don't mean to be putting people off and away from them. Like the truth of the matter is that if you meet at a church,
Mhm.
a lot of times that is very alienating and triggering for people.
Yep.
They don't feel safe going there as whoever they are, whether they are trans or non-binary, or they just have religious trauma or whatever. So,
Yeah.
and of course, a lot of times we pick churches because they'll give you a free spot.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is that that church is giving you a free spot because they want people to become comfortable with their church and join their church.
Mhm.
Because the statistics are really very clear is that if you go to a church building, you begin to feel more comfortable and then you feel more comfortable about joining that church. And so it's not necessarily out of the goodness of their heart that they're giving you space, but it's
Yeah.
free space. And a lot of times as quilt guilds and different stuff like that, we end up, tricking out for free space.
Mhm.
And when we don't make when we don't make our meeting spaces accessible for people, or we don't make them even like accessible for people who have disabilities,
Mhm.
and different stuff like that, when we don't really spend our time thinking about those things,
Yeah.
um, we hold people back from joining
Yeah.
us that
A
way.
100%. 100%. And I think it's like I've heard it from multiple different people. They're like, I don't have a guild to join because I'm not going to go to a church. I don't want
Mhm.
to be around old, judgy white ladies who are basically just like this is what I would find in church. And
Mhm.
that's essentially what so many guilds are. And they're scared to branch out because they don't want to push members away. But I also think there has to be a shift because we're excluding too many people to make it seem like that's the only way that they have to stay this way or we're going to lose all these people. It's like, well, we're going to lose them all anyway because they're older and they're
Or
going
they're
to
gonna
pass
die.
away.
They're gonna
So
die.
like, why can't we start making the community and our spaces safe for the upcoming quilters, for the people who want to be in this community? Why
Yeah,
can't we make it a safe space for everyone?
it is.
And
It's
so,
a big issue, and there are definitely, even in, I mean, unless you're talking like a super duper conservative, created for that purpose quilt group, you're going to have people in it who are, all parts of diversity, but most of them
mhm,
are probably keeping their mouth shut not to rock the boat. Because and,
right.
and I have people who absolutely tell me that is like, I just keep that part to myself and basically, swill, Listerine when I get home because all the things that I heard, because I want to,
Right.
I just, for myself, I can't do that. I can't do that. And I can't hang out with somebody who thinks, my child is an abomination. I'm not going to sanction that behavior. And so
No.
I have to build something else. Now, the building something else is difficult because when you sanction something under your name, you become legally liable.
Mhm,
And so that is why up till now we haven't done it.
mhm,
We haven't made, badass quilter, guilds. First place, because it becomes more out of my control
right.
as things happen. And then, I'm like, man, am I signing up for the world's biggest headache? I
Right.
mean, I think Modern Quilt Guild has gotten, that on top, but they went through some very painful stages
Mhm.
where they had to really rein people in and groups in. And that's why groups splintered off and left, because
Yeah.
it started as this kind of like, sure, everybody meet if you want to meet, and it's all good. And then they were informed that there was legal liability to that, of people
Mhm.
meeting under their name. So I haven't been able to resolve that issue yet.
Yeah.
And of course, any lawyer you talk to is like, oh no, because that's their job, is to point out all the horrible things that could happen to you.
Right. Exactly.
Like they could take your house and your cat. I mean,
Yeah. You're
oh,
like,
look at
"No, not the cat."
the cat. I know. So I haven't been able to resolve that, but I would love to encourage people to start their own little pods,
Mhm.
start their own little meetups, and basically it can be at your local bar. I mean,
Right.
you do a social night where it's just people getting to meet up, and then after that, once you find your like-minded folks, and then you pool the time to find some place that is open and safe, and start putting out there who you are,
Mhm.
because that really becomes very self-selecting.
Yeah.
If you say, we are a diversity positive group, and in your logo you slap on a trans flag and a rainbow flag,
Yeah.
most likely conservative folk are not going to show up for it.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
if you say who you are, then it's going to become a self, perpetuating, and it's going to get out to the people who need it. So I would love to see more people stepping up that way. I mean, because for as much as I would love to do this, I just not
Mhm.
have not legally wrangled the way to do it without, um, you know, risking my family's well-being that way.
Right. No, and I think there has to be some, you know, a lot of consideration for that too, because there are so many legal things that come with being an official guild and
Mhm.
an official nonprofit or not for profit and
Yep.
all these things, especially a guild. Like we just went through a really tricky situation, or I say we, the guild I'm in, because they had to rewrite the bylaws
Mhm.
because they were rewriting them every year. It was just like this crazy
Oh,
process that absolutely did not need to happen and was actually illegal. And so they worked with a lawyer to get everything above board and legal and corrected. And it caused this huge uproar with some of the older members. And some left because they were like, I don't, it's like,
yeah.
okay, but we're protecting everybody by doing this, and we're protecting you, and we're protecting everybody else who was involved in this past behavior and these past ways of doing things. Like, how can you not see that this just benefits everybody in the long run?
Mhm.
But then it's like, oh, they're just mad because they no longer get to throw their weight around and have it mean anything. And
And
so
there
I
is
think,
so much of that. I mean,
yeah,
even if you run a Girl Scout troop, I mean,
yeah,
there's a lot of stuff in the
mhm,
background. And so it becomes really, so that's why I really like the concept of like a meetup, because a
yeah,
meet doesn't have the same, because, and you don't have like an official checkbook. You don't have a checkbook of the group. You don't have,
right,
and so because what you're really looking for in the end is you're looking for community.
yep, those
You're not
connections.
really looking for that structure. That structure has to happen at certain points when you want to gain a certain amount of legitimacy, or like I said, have a bank account or do something like that.
Mhm,
Sponsor a quilt show, because there's lots of very large guilds that sponsor really large beautiful quilt shows. But
mhm,
if that entanglement is not what you're looking for, you're really looking for a meetup. You're looking to find your people, and then saying, hey, every third Thursday, we're going to hit up this, place, and do our social time. Because even if you're not necessarily quilting together at that time,
mhm,
you're building that community so that you know that you are not alone.
yep,
And I
exactly.
think that makes a lot of difference for
Mhm,
people.
right. It can be life-saving sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think too, sometimes like with like small groups, because guilds have small groups within them sometimes, and 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 the guild I'm in does, which is cool. So, potentially there could be a small group created that could be more inclusive or more friendly to everyone, but again, legal ramifications just in case. But I think if you do a meetup, it's less like, what am I trying to say? Like there's less pressure to like stick around for a certain amount of time, or be super committed. Whereas if you're like, okay, I'm gonna come bring all my stuff and sew,
Yeah.
that that feels heavy sometimes versus just meeting up with some people and making sure they are your people before then it's like, okay, let's have a crafting day. And
Mhm.
then at that point, like bigger things can happen from that. But yeah, I love that concept of just like being able to find your people, and a badass quilter society, if you can connect with people who are in your neck of the woods because you are in the same group in that sense, like then that just
And that's
opens
kind of
up.
what I want to try to facilitate, is in some way, is finding, making some sort of friendship database or something like that.
Mhm.
And again, that's got a lot of ramification. Everything is really hard. Um,
Yeah.
everything, like you think of it like this, oh, that's a cute little idea. And then and then you're like, oh, well, then you have to protect people's names and their stuff like that.
Mhm.
And then you have to have two people who are also, compliant with talking to each other, and because you're not giving away, stuff like that. But I want to
Right.
have some way of people finding each other, because you never know if the person at the other side of your neighborhood is also like this quilter, or this
Right.
that you would really like to hang out with or know, or just, have a friendly,
Mhm.
whatever with. Because and sometimes, and that's actually the coolest thing that people tell me about, like having their baddest quilter gear on if they're at their local quilt store or whatever. They say, sometimes they can get some serious side eye, but they also find friends,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
otherwise you don't know, because it's those outward identifiers. I mean, so
Mhm.
I drive a Ford F-150 truck because I'm doing so much remodeling on the house. I'm always bringing home drywall and lumber and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
stuff like that. So no tiny car for me right now, even though I'm past my years. I mean, I used to drive a big Suburban because I had all the kids and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
right.
Now I still drive something big because I have to bring home mulch. But
Yeah.
on it, I have the Badass Quilter medallion and some other stuff like that. And I've more than once had somebody leave a note on my windshield and tell me how cool it was, and
Oh,
look up, and found out. And they're like, and because of course you have your phone on you, and they're like, I
mhm.
looked it up and you're a real thing,
Yeah.
And so that's really cool, because like, and I think about like people having, because like that's the new, that's the fierce unicorn. So we've got our friendly unicorn and we have a fierce unicorn.
I
Because
love it.
like, because the thing is, because like on these three are the new logo stickers. So we have the one with
Oh,
the so this is with the rainbows, and it says reproductive rights are human rights, Black Lives Matter, science is real, love is love. And
mm,
so we have that one, and then we have the really we have the one with the skull and the
yeah.
snake, and the crossed
I love
needle
it.
and stuff like that. So cool. But because we're not just one style of person within BadAss Quilter
Mhm.
Society, we have like people with different like design aesthetics.
Right.
We have the people who are like really the fierce unicorn. And we have people who are like the super friendly, cheerful unicorn, and
Yeah.
who are like really into like the snakes and the goth and the stuff like that. And then people who are really attracted to being with us because we talk about these values a lot.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
it's really nice to be able to make this thing, because previously, like when you like I said, I do a lot of business podcasts and stuff like that. They're like, your logo has to stay the same, your thing has to stay the same, but our words stay the same, BadAss Quilter Society, but
Right.
because we don't gather because we're all paper piecers, or we're all one style of quilting per se. We're all those styles. We're all those
Right.
styles, we're all those things. And we come
Mhm.
together because of this other bigger calling in our lives.
Right.
So that's the fun. That's been really fun, because that was like, and I didn't know if it was going to be good, doing, because every business thing says don't do that. And I was
Right.
like, I
Yeah.
kept being attracted to the idea that there are like different people who'd like to, and because we've always had like the circle that just says BadAss Quilter Society, and there's nothing to offend anybody in there, except somebody will always found. I have had people in my old car who scratched through my, yeah. And I've had other people have it.
Hurts.
I mean, I've had people send it to me. I'm like, I'm going to send you a new one. They're like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it has happened before. And some people worry about that. In fact,
Yeah.
at one point, that's why we had one that just said BAQS on it,
Mm.
because nobody would know, but they knew, and people who know, it's kind of like the secret sign,
Right.
so because you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
but it didn't really identify people. So, but I found way more good than bad.
Yeah. For sure.
And that's a risk that I'm personally willing to take.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing why I'm willing to open up my email in the morning. And because sometimes
Mhm.
there's email that's not very nice.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I mean, it's not my favorite by any stretch of the imagination. And sometimes I'll put it up and make fun of it. 'Cause I'm like, if you took the time to write me a bunch of hate, I'm going to use you for social media capital. Um,
Yeah. Like, thank you.
I know. I was like, yeah. I mean, and then a lot of times I just hit, trash, trash. And
Mhm.
sometimes we get a lot. It depends if I've written an article. It depends on
Mm.
what I've said, and
Mhm.
whether it's gotten like on the wrong side of TikTok or whatever.
Sure.
But I'm willing to do that because there are so many people who are like, I didn't know this existed.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, for every person who says I did not know this existed, I've been doing this by myself, I'm lonely.
Mhm.
I found my people. And then I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I can take another hate email,
Mhm.
you
Right.
know.
It's like it's worth it in the sense that you're then you're taking that out of the world so that someone can have a sense of safety somewhere.
Mhm.
And
And
like,
that's worth it to me. And
yeah.
so is it heavy sometimes? Yeah, it's really heavy sometimes. And previously, I mean, I've gotten some like hateful, dangerous comments.
Mm.
But quite frankly, more than anything, what I get like on Instagram is dick pics from dudes.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Like,
Boys
dude,
are so
I was like, when I say,
messy.
as I'm like, as individually, there are many men I love. As a species, I am not especially fond of them.
No, I'm with you. I'm like, and that was that whole thing. It's like, not all men, but enough of you that,
I know, enough
yikes.
of you keep doing this, and anymore. I mean, I take like I'll like take screenshots, and I'm just like, here you go, and I like, there's like that woman I love that she basically goes now, and she goes and she finds their profile, and then if they're real people, because a lot of times they're like, kind of like bots, or just
Yeah.
dudes in their mother's basements. I mean, I'm like,
Right.
dude, find something better to do with your time. Get a hobby. Try
Yeah.
knitting. I mean,
Yeah.
there's gotta be
I'll
something.
teach you how to sew.
I know. I was like, there's got to be something here for you. But she goes and she, like, when it's like guys who are just out there who are being really bad, she goes back through their profile and she finds their parents and their family, and she
Oh.
sends screenshots of all the horrible things that they've said and sends it to their mothers and their
Ah!
employers and stuff like that. I love her. I follow her. I can't remember her name all of a sudden, but I just
Oh
love.
man.
She says, "This is my new hobby."
Yeah, honestly.
So
Well, and
people
I think
now. Yep.
Yeah. Well, and that's like we were kind of talking about the pros and cons of social media, and I think that one of the cons is that like people get real brave, but I also think it's a pro because it's really showing like people are showing their true colors, right? When they do things like that, you're like, "Oh, I see who you are on the inside now."
Yeah.
Or if they're like, your show is probably you're not my demographic. I'm not your demographic, but here's all the things I don't like about your show." And I'm like, "Then don't fucking listen." Like,
It's like, why are you listening? Well, that's what my husband always says when he said, when like, I can't believe you said that. And my husband says, like, have you met her? Have you
yeah.
met your wife? I mean, and that was like one of the things when I had the really big, because I closed down my Facebook page a couple of years
Mm.
ago and I had 30,000 members on it.
Oh,
And
wow.
I closed it down because as much as I kept trying to clarify the message again and again and again, people kept having, how dare you, especially because it was a very hot time. I mean,
Mhm.
because, Trump had become president and it was just like a very emboldened time. But it was like, why did you join this page? Why did you
Yeah.
join? I mean, there are a million other things. There are a million other quilting pages out there. Some of
Mhm.
them very boldly dedicated to, things that this other person believed in. They're like, how dare you? I'm like, have you not been paying attention? Have
Yeah,
you
like,
not?
where have you
There is
been?
10 years of content back on my blog.
Mhm.
Which things did you, I mean, and sometimes I think it's somebody because they came in because like I was doing a huge giveaway
Mm.
or something like that, and that's the only reason, and they
Yeah.
ended up staying there. But I mean, since I've come back and reopened, that's why I've been, somebody's like, man, you are beating this drum. I was like, I am beating this drum. And I'm
Yeah.
unabashedly beating this drum because I don't want people who don't need to be here and don't want to be here here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think of it as is kind of like chlorining my pool on the regular basis.
Right.
Um, because, but why would you want to be there if it wasn't your thing?
Right.
And I don't
Right.
necessarily understand. I mean, because some people just love the drama. They love the
Mhm.
drama of being mad at somebody or something like that. But there's so much
Mhm.
other stuff for everybody out there. So
Right.
I'm just curating this thing that's very tightly curated
Yeah.
for people and so that's why I put it on so much stuff
Yeah.
so that there is no question.
Right. There's no doubt. There can be no room for
There is no
questioning
room
what
for
you're
error.
about.
Yes. Yeah. And that's okay. And I mean, and somebody said, well, it overshadows. I said, you know what? For each person that it overshadows, for another person, it saves them.
Mhm. It's a ray of sunshine for somebody in their darkest corner.
Yeah, it is. And when they send me their pictures when they're drinking with their mug in the morning and
Mhm.
that stuff like that, I'm just like, yes. It makes me so
Yeah.
happy because they are so happy because they're
Yeah.
like, I'm part of a place now. Because what we all want in the end is we want connection with people who love us
Mhm.
and understand us.
Mhm.
And we all deserve that.
Yep.
So if I'm gonna have to stand there and shout it on a street corner, well, I guess I'm gonna
Mhm.
do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
hopefully I can continue to make it as a business because I can't, I, it's not a social action thing.
mhm.
And so it has to pay the bills. I mean, yes, you love long arming, but if people were not paying you, that's a whole different story.
Exactly.
You're still gonna long arm for yourself, sure, but there's a certain point where you have to decide, I'm not a social advocacy in that it has to pay the bills also.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
I think a
Yeah.
lot of times as women, we are expected to do things for free because they're good for the world.
Mhm.
But, and there is obviously a lot that I do. I mean, I don't get up every 2 hours all night long taking care of neonatal kittens because somebody's paying me.
Right.
That is my giving back to the world.
Sure.
Um, but this has a different calling,
Right.
and I can't back away from that or be ashamed of it because
Mhm.
then I cannot authentically say, yes, I'm charging $5 for that sticker because it does all these things.
Right.
Buy it or don't buy it. I don't really care in the end, but I'm not
Mhm.
going to feel bad about it.
Yeah.
And just like you don't feel bad about charging your worth for quilting a quilt.
Right.
Um,
Right. And
just
it's
just
that
because you're a woman, you're like, no.
yeah.
My
It's like it's
mechanic has never once gotten, has never been like, this carburetor, it just gave me such joy to put in. I'm going to give you a discount. Never, never. My mechanic said that. And I'm never
No.
going to say that because I enjoyed, because you enjoy, like, because this was a visual feast of a quilt and you really, you loved it. You loved working on it. But it doesn't mean just because you love something does not mean you're
Mhm.
not owed your worth for doing the work
Right.
on it.
Yep.
So, my thing is that if a man would charge for it, I'm going to charge for it too.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, so that the next generation of women after me can go, oh, that's my worth.
Mhm.
In
Yeah.
fact, it was really funny. My oldest daughter, I put up a thing today from being at the post office because it was
Oh, yeah, I saw it. I was
I was
like,
at the
"Preach
post,
it, sister."
I was at the post office, but my oldest daughter, who she's 32,
Mhm.
and she put up a stuff. Even if you did add extra postage, mom, is what she said, is that that's because you pack everything by hand. You drive it to the post office. That is the shipping and handling on the thing, and
Right.
your time is worth that. Your time is,
Right.
and so I love the fact that my children have embodied this message. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's what I want for this next generation of everybody's, really,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
to have that power to say that.
Yeah. I don't know if you know of, Vivian Kay, but she
Hmm.
does a lot of small business talk, then she's an entrepreneur, but anyway, she, like, trademarked it and everything is, like, "What would Chad do?" And it's
Uh-huh.
basically like, if like, go into things with the audacity of a mediocre white man because they usually have the audacity to go into places where they don't belong or don't have the qualifications to be, and 9 times out of 10, women are overqualified to be
Yes.
asking for the raise or the promotion or whatever they're asking for, and they get shot down over a Chad, and so her whole thing is,
Yep.
"What would Chad do?" And if this is what would Chad
Yes.
do, then you fucking do it because you're a badass bitch and you can.
Yeah, well, that's right, because I've got a sticker that's holding that is basically a mediocre white man sticker. It's I have not got the graphic right for it because I labor over my graphics, and I haven't gotten it I moved the words around, and I'm like,
Yeah.
and so it sits off in the corner of my desk, and I pull it back down into thing, and I look at it again, and I'm like, because I love that, because have the chutzpah of a mediocre white man and just make that quilt. I mean, because
Yeah,
they dive in, and that's okay, because
right.
that is that's what we've conditioned them for. And
Mhm.
so the change there is also, as parents, is from is to raise children who are different and who see things differently. I mean, I hope we're emboldening a next generation, and
Yeah.
you only do that by not staying neutral on that side of injustice.
Yep. No,
So
for sure.
hell
And
or
the
high
more we
water,
talk
I'm
about
here.
it, yeah, good. It's like the more we talk about it, the more we bring it about, the more we, you know, broach these uncomfortable mental health topics
Oh yeah.
or, the easier it is for people, one, to feel seen and heard, which is like, I think such a battle for a lot of this is people just don't feel heard. And so then they get louder and louder and louder, or they hide because they're scared of the loud ones who
Mhm.
who think that their opinion is more important than anything else. And so I think those of us who are advocating for the ones who are scared and hiding, the easier it's going to be for them to find ground and a grounding space to be themselves. And I'm here
What
for it.
that's what
So
I want. That's what I want. I wanna be, if I have to be the lightning rod, I'll be it. You
yeah.
know, and so that's because I have that ability. Is there gonna be a day when maybe I don't have that ability? Yeah, probably. And there are times that I don't have that ability, and I have to kinda take, some time and, kinda recalibrate my thoughts, and, get with my homegirls and my home
Yeah.
guys, and, and find that equilibrium.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's good stuff, and I wanna see a quilting and sewing world that is openly welcoming to everyone, so that they can
Hmm.
embrace their creative side, because I think that just filters off into everything else.
Yep.
Mhm.
For sure.
Yeah,
Exactly. Well, cool. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've
absolutely.
really, this has been so enlightening.
Thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed it so much. I love seeing the industry change, and standing up in a place that you know, makes it a comfortable place for other people to be. Thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. All right.
Excellent.
Well, where can people find you online before we
Gosh,
jam
so
out?
of course you can always find me at badassquilterssociety.com. There are two S's that unfortunately butt up against each other in the middle of that. So that's easy to find. Honestly, if you Google Badass Quilter, it shows up. But the Badass Quilter on Instagram and the Badass Quilter over on TikTok also. We do have a Facebook page, but honestly, right now, it's very hard to grow on Facebook.
Mhm.
It is not the place that it once was. So while we do have one over there, when I restarted the page, it did not allow me to, it wouldn't allow me. So I had to kind of like jigger the names together to make it think it's all
Mm,
one word,
right.
because it wouldn't let me use the word badass
Oh,
anymore,
of course.
even though for 10 years I'd had a page,
Yeah.
but it was under their profanity thing metric. Anyway, but we're over there. But the
Okay.
easiest way is on the website, or which leads over to the store as well. On the website, you can get over to the store where all the stickers are, where all the t-shirts are, that kind of stuff. And then
Yes.
from there,
Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, I'll put all those in the show notes so people can just do a one click and get to you. And
awesome.
yeah, thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you.